Hello, my friends, and welcome to Champions Together 101. My name is Craig Tornquist, and Champions Together is a wonderful partnership between the Indiana High School Athletic Association and Special Olympics Indiana. Today, I'm delighted to be having a conversation with the director of Champions Together, Brian Avery. Brian, first of all, thank you for joining me. And I want to begin by learning a little bit more about you. Can you walk us through your journey that has brought you to this position?
Well, I have to say that I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that I grew up in a household in LaPorte, Indiana, in the northern part of the state, where my father was a high school official, did football, basketball, and baseball, concentrated mostly in basketball and football. So from as young as I can remember that he could trust me to sit in the bleachers and not run around and go crazy. I went to games with him and I was enamored from the get-go with education-based athletics and high school sports and everything that went around it. So even before I began what I would consider my athletic career, I was a fan of sport and everything that it involved. And being the son of an official, I kind of got the behind the camera look at things because I got to be in locker rooms with officials. I got to kind of see and hear what coaches said and how teams prepared for games and so on and so forth. Some things I probably maybe shouldn't have heard, but I did. So that's my background in terms of what happened before I started my schooling and my education. I'm a graduate of LaPorte High School and went on to Marian College, which is now a university in Indianapolis. And from that point on, I've spent better than 40 years involved in education-based athletics. I started my teaching coaching career at Cecina High School, a small Catholic school on the east side of Indianapolis. I then went to Lawrence Central High School, obviously a larger urban high school on the northeast side of Indianapolis, where I taught and coached for 12 years. And then I decided that I wanted to do something different. Nothing wrong with classroom education. I certainly respect and admire anyone who devotes their life to helping students learn and grow to be the best they can possibly be. But I wanted to do something different. So I directed my energy and my professional career towards athletic administration. And I started at Franklin Central High School in the year 2000 as an associate athletic director for a year. The following year, I became the athletic director, stayed there for 11 years in total. Did the same job at Speedway High School for 11 years, so 22 years as an athletic director. And I'm now in my third year as a director of Champions Together, and I consider myself very, very fortunate and blessed to have this position.
Well, you've been a great addition to our team. So, what exactly is the mission of Champions Together?
Well, I think the mission of Champions Together, as our symbol says, is to promote servant leadership and to change lives for the better. Servant leadership is something obviously that we want our leaders in our schools doing, not only our leaders, but everyone in our schools. But if our leaders are doing it, then others in schools tend to follow. And those schools and communities that have strong student leadership groups, they can get a lot of things done. Those kids are usually highly regarded in their buildings. They're hard workers. They're typically good students. They don't necessarily have to be the best athletes, but typically they're the best representatives of their school and the community. But they're also provided for some pretty nice things. They're, typically given nice venues to play in, transportation to and from games, uniforms, pre and post game meals, positive coaching. There's a lot of good things that come out of being a high school athlete. And I think uh, when Commissioner Cox, then Commissioner Bobby Cox, had the idea of initiating a program that promoted servant leadership, he was looking for those students to do more, to give back to their communities, so that not only did they do that as high school students, but hopefully that would be something that they would carry into their adulthood and understand the importance of servant leadership, helping make things better for others who may or may not have the same position in life that they do. So that's the servant leadership side of it. The changing lives, Craig, I think can go both ways. One of the first lessons I learned, or one of the things I continue to see more and more involving myself with the Unified Sports and Champions Together, not only does it help those students with intellectual disabilities, those students who we label our partners, or excuse me, our athletes in Unified Sports, but it also helps our partners. The student athletic leaders, or just the what we would call typical traditional student who decides, hey, I want to try this unified sports. I think it'd be fun. Maybe I'm not good to be on the track team, or maybe I'm not physical enough to play traditional football, but I like sports and I like running around. I want to help others. I'd love to put a uniform on that's got my school name across the chest and be an athlete. And if nothing else, for my good health and the health of others, to do this. So I think for changing lives of not only the athletes and the partners, but hopefully, as we'll touch on a little bit later, other lives in the school and communities in which those kids come.
So you use this phrase a couple of times. What exactly is a unified sport?
A unified sport is one that involves students both with and without intellectual disabilities. And it allows those students to compete together on the same playing field in two, what we would call IHSA sponsored sports, flag football and track and field. And at this point in time, two other activities that are sponsored and ran by Special Olympics Indiana, and those are bocce and bowling. And nowhere else, certainly within the landscape of Indiana High School Athletic Association sports, would you find students with and without intellectual disabilities competing together. Special Olympics has been around for a long time. Obviously, it's allowed for people with intellectual disabilities to engage in activities that otherwise they might not be able to, but now we're including traditional students representing their high schools and communities.
And they're in it together.
Absolutely. In fact, you might argue that it's maybe one of the most level playing fields that we have. There's no class sports and unified sports as there are in some of our team sports as it is now. But for instance, in unified flag football, there's 5 members to a team, or that are at least on the field at one point in time. And there are 3 athletes, 3 students with intellectual disabilities, and 2 partners, what we would consider traditional student athletes on the team together. So it's an evenly matched contest. In track and field, a unified athlete matches up with a unified partner. It's about as level as you can get. And yes, they are playing together and they are a team, a definite team with rules and guidelines and the same academic expectations we have for our 22 other IHSA sponsored sports. They follow the same rules, same guidelines. So it's a sport. It's not just an activity, it's a sport.
And the best team, they earn the same state championship trophy title as any other IHSAA sport. Is that right?
It's identical, Craig. It's the same size trophy for a state champion and a state runner-up that you would see handed out at any of our other traditional sports. So it takes up as much room in a trophy case as a boys basketball state championship trophy or a volleyball, whatever the case may be. So yes, now the 2 activities that are currently run by Special Olympics Indiana, a little bit different, not necessarily followed by IHSA guidelines. They certainly involve students within Indiana High School Athletic Association member schools, but sometimes there are schools that might not have a large enough population of students with intellectual disabilities to be able to field teams. So they might partner with a local county program or find other sources for their student athletes to be able to participate. That would be the main difference between an IHSA sponsored sport and a Special Olympics sponsored sport.
But within unified bocce and bowling, there's still sectionals, regionals, state championship trophy. That trophy is presented and created by Special Olympics Indiana
Yes.
for both of those sports. So Champions Together covers high school students, but it's part of a larger continuum that Special Olympics Indiana has to promote sporting opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities, really of all ages. Can you talk a little bit more about how Champions Together fits into the bigger picture?
I think I mentioned earlier that my bout or my experience with education-based athletics started when I was 8 or 9 years old. So too can a person with an intellectual disability in the state of Indiana. Starting as early as 8 years old, and in our elementary schools, we have what we call a Young Champions Together program, or Young Champions program, where we promote inclusion throughout elementary schools in the state of Indiana. Obviously, once a student leaves elementary school, they're going to go to a middle school or a junior high. Students that want to continue to participate or want to have an opportunity to participate in not only activities, but also sports involving students with and without intellectual disabilities, then enter a Champions in the Middle program. Those students then matriculate to high school, and that's where we join the Champions Together program, where we, as a representative of the IHSA, in a perfect world, I would like for all 411 of our members to do something related to Champions Together. We're getting there. Hopefully that's a path that we'll continue to forge as time moves on. And even after students graduate from high school, I see, Craig, in my 3 years being involved in the program, more and more students who don't want to stop being involved in the cause of inclusion and see the importance of it and realize that there are things that they can do beyond their high school careers. There are several colleges in the state of Indiana that either have or starting a program involving Special Olympics and on a collegiate level. And then, of course, once a student or person becomes of age past their college career, there are adult programs all across the state. 92 counties, 92 special education programs, 92 Special Olympics programs in our state where students, after finishing their educational careers, can either become involved as a coach, a volunteer, an athlete, and somehow continue to give to the idea of conclusion, providing opportunities for those that might not have that opportunity if it weren't for such wonderful programs. So we're kind of in the middle of the continuum, I guess. It's high school is a 4-year period, but I think I could argue, and I think you would agree, that it's probably 4 of the most formative years that you're going to have in terms of growth and maturation and kind of figuring out where you want to be and what you want to do with the rest of your life. Sometimes, obviously, some students are a little bit more prepared than others, but I think that the vast majority of our students who participate in unified sports understand that it's a really good thing, and they see not only what it did for them individually, but people they came across in their school and others, and simply want to continue doing good, which that's servant leadership, and that's one of the cornerstones of the program.
So, schools that want to go beyond unified sports in their effort to make sure that students of all abilities are included in their building, they have an opportunity to earn a thing called the Unified Champion School banner. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
A Unified Champions banner is simply a representation that a school has made a commitment to be an inclusive place for everyone who comes to be a part of, not only their own students with intellectual disabilities, but anyone who might enter their buildings and walk through their hallways. They would get a sense that everyone is welcome and that everyone, no matter what their abilities or disabilities, are treated the same. And there are basically what we call the 4 pillars that a school has to achieve to earn a unified champions banner. That is inclusive student leadership is one. Being involved in a unified sport activity is another. A whole school engagement piece is the third. And then the fourth is raising money to promote and support the activities of Special Olympics Indiana throughout our state.
Okay, let's break those down. Pillar number 1 is inclusive student leadership. What does that look like?
So the schools I think that are doing it the best probably had some sort of student athletic leadership team dating back many, many years. Coaches and administrators have done a good job of identifying the student leaders in their program or in their schools. Sometimes those students are athletes, sometimes they're not, but some sort of student leadership team. And if you want to make it inclusive, then you have to involve students with intellectual disabilities as part of that team. And as I was told very, very early in my tenure in this current position, and now preach to others, students and their parents with intellectual disabilities don't necessarily want others doing things for their children and for the parents. They want them involved in the process, in the decision-making process. So we want students working with each other, those students with and without intellectual disabilities. So if we go back to unified sports and identify an athlete as a person with an intellectual disability and a partner as a traditional student athlete, we want both of those represented on the student leadership team. That's inclusive. And to have those students with disabilities involved in meetings and planning of events and hopefully setting a standard for future leadership teams that if you're going to represent the entire school, then you need to have entities of the entire school on your team.
All right. Pillar number 2 is whole school engagement. What is whole school engagement?
Whole school engagement to me means that at the very, very least, you are providing information to students about what the student leadership team and unified sports team is doing in your school, but more importantly, educating about the opportunities that any student in the building that wants to get involved in changing not only their lives, but others for the better, there's an opportunity to do so. And the importance that our school is not just our sports teams, it's not just our best buddies group, it's not just the student council, it's everyone that walks our hallways. Um, there are some really big high schools in the state of Indiana that have wonderful programs. There's some really small schools in Indiana that have some wonderful programs, and everywhere in between. So we never want size of school to be a factor. So we'll cater programs to various schools depending on their size and their needs. But kind of the idea that no one should be left behind. And we certainly don't want student athletes to get the idea that anyone in their building is less important than they are.
Now, Brian, as you know, whole school engagement is my passion. And we have 2 different options that we can provide that will help you fulfill this pillar. Option number 1 is the Champions Together in-person assembly. This is a traditional school assembly that happens in either your auditorium or your gymnasium. We bring the entire student body together and introduce them in a very fun way to Champions Together. There's lots of music, there's tons of audience participation. We feature volunteers from the audience. And about 2/3 of the way through the program, Brian will interview some of your inclusive student leaders, partners, and athletes, and they'll share with the student body their experiences with Champions Together and give them specific ideas on how they can get involved with this wonderful movement. Option number 2 is a unified virtual assembly. This is done through Zoom, where I will sit down and interview up to 10 to 12 of your athletes and partners in advance. I'll take their answers, I'll edit it all together, and I will put together a video that we post on YouTube, and I will send you the link to it, and you can then share it with your teachers, and they can show it at a time that is convenient for them. This normally runs about 12 minutes. We cover what it means to be a unified champion school. We cover the 4 different pillars. We've got some really cool professionally produced videos embedded within it, and we've gotten great reviews on this. To give you an idea of what your student piece would look like, I want to share with you a clip now of a student montage I produced for New Albany High School earlier this year. But this is my favorite part of every video. It's where we feature your students talking about Champions Together in your building. Check this out.
My favorite memory was from our first meet, and it was just so amazing to see everyone come together. And at the end, when they announced like the awards, you wouldn't know who won and who didn't because everyone was just so like cheering and everyone was so excited to be there, and that was just amazing to watch.
I was doing so well, right? Because I was getting up to speed, right? Right, and right, all the other right teenagers beat me to the line, right, and right, I was just trying to be so faster and fast and speedy.
So I would say the competitiveness and the togetherness. So the competitiveness aspect, everybody wants to win. But with unified track, like really everybody is a winner because at the end of the race, everybody's celebrating from first to last place compared to track where, somebody might be hanging their head at last place and then the first place is like cheering, gloating. The first place person unified will go to the last place person and act like they did the exact same. Like it doesn't really matter.
You got to try your best, get some more exercise and do your best.
I just think like these kids are no different than us. I mean, they deserve the same treatment, same privilege of getting to play the sport they love. So I think it's important that we welcome them with all respect, like we do. We celebrate them as much as they would like basketball here or baseball or football, and just they deserve the utmost respect because I mean, once again, they are student athletes just like us. They go to school every day, wake up, go to practice, and it's tough to do, but they deserve the same respect we do.
I will tell them to go out for unified track because we're like friends, we're like family, and if you can't do something, try your best because that's what I did.
Man, I had fun. Like, I had a blast. It was fun. It was fun competing with other kids from other schools, and it was exciting to me. I mean, even running, it was just exciting. It was exciting from the clapping and cheering. I love that, even for those kids too. So it was good all around.
Get good grades and have more fun on unified track.
I mean, it's just an all-around just inclusive and enjoyable experience for everyone. You see the unified athletes, and then also just your student athletes having a blast between the pairs, and everybody within the crowd is always having fun watching these student athletes go out and have a blast. And it's amazing we get to provide these unique opportunities for these students.
If you want to have fun and if you want to see people around you having fun and just be in a joyous environment, I would join. It is a carefree environment where everyone is supporting. There's no judgment whatsoever. And there's always someone to support, and there's always someone supporting you. You always have someone's back, and someone always has yours. So it's an inclusive environment. It's a family environment.
1, 2, 3, dogs! Let's go!
I love it. Well, that brings us to pillar number 3, which is unified sports. Brian, can you talk a little bit more about how schools achieve this pillar?
I think it's important to remember for those schools wanting to get involved in Champions Together or possibly pursue a banner, while participating in a unified sport activity is a pillar of the program, we certainly don't want them handcuffed by the idea that it has to be one of the 4 traditional current unified sports: flag football, track and field, bocce, or bowling. Any sporting activity that involves students with and without intellectual disabilities participating together on a field, a court, whatever the case may be, would qualify as a unified sport activity. For example, when I was athletic director at Speedway High School, our student population of those with intellectual disabilities was somewhat limited. Didn't really have enough participation at the time to field one of the teams in the traditional sports. So we had kickball games where students with and without intellectual disabilities played a kickball game. And one spring it rained. So we moved it inside and made it a wiffle ball game. But it was a unified sport activity. There were a couple practices, beforehand. There's a culminating activity after the event occurred. So it doesn't have to be a long season. It doesn't have to be multiple contests. While we would encourage that if there's the personnel available to have that, it can be a one-day event. And obviously we'd like to see that promoted within the school and community. And so more and more people just become educated on what unified sports are, the importance of inclusion, and how we want that to grow in our schools and communities.
Very good. Well, that brings us to pillar number 4, which is fundraising. The goal is to raise at least $1,500 for Special Olympics Indiana to help us promote unified sports and Champions Together all over this great state. One way that schools are achieving this goal is by participating in a thing called the Polar Plunge. That's where an individual says, if you donate enough money to Special Olympics Indiana, I'll go jump in a lake in the middle of the winter. Check this out.
At the event, there's nothing but school colors and school pride.
Very nice.
Special Olympics has changed my life by bringing people into my life. We're a family, and we get to compete against each other.
I really didn't have many friends. I just stayed to myself. Once I joined, I was out there doing more.
I remember my mom was crying. She was so excited, and I just felt so happy and so excited for my brother.
Doesn't that look refreshing? Brian, what are some other things you've seen schools do to reach their fundraising goal?
There are basketball games where fans in attendance will be asked to donate. There seems to be a lot of T-shirt sales, baked goods for sale. I went to a game in Southern Indiana where you could buy a certain number of little rubber ducks that our children might have played with in the bathtub, and you give $5 and you get 5 of those, and you try and at halftime of the varsity game, you throw them, and if your duck lands in the middle and the center jump surfer, you win a prize. But obviously the idea is to raise money for Special Olympics and have those profits go there. So I think I alluded earlier that no matter the size or makeup of the school, there's a way to get to the Champions Together banner, and there's a way to get to $1,500. It may not happen in a year, it may not happen in 2 years, but it's a process. And once the process starts and more people become aware, then that pillar becomes easier to achieve.
I know that you're in high schools all the time. What kind of impact is Champions Together having on the schools that you visit?
It's really hard for me to narrow down on 2 or 3 impacts that Champions Together has, because I think it's so far reaching, and I'm sure there are some things happening within our programs that are really positive that we don't even know about yet. But what I would like to focus on are a couple things. One, I have yet to speak to an administrator in the state of Indiana who has a Champions Together program in their school who hasn't told me, Brian, it's one of the best things we do. It's improved our school culture. It's made our school a better place. I can't believe we didn't do it 5 years ago. That speaks volumes. More and more principals are being asked to do more and more for their schools. And I don't know how you have a successful school with a poor school culture. To me, a positive school culture is the basis for anything good that's going to happen within that building, whether it's academics, athletics, performing arts, community service, whatever the case may be. There's a very a statement that I find very appealing to what I believe the importance of our program is, and that is an athlete with positive character can greatly affect a team. A team with positive character can greatly affect a school. A school with positive character can greatly affect a community. To me, that speaks volumes, because we're going from individual students to teams to a school to a community. And to see that growth, it's amazing. The other thing I find and know that our program is successful and is a tribute is so many of our young people are choose helping others as a profession. There are students that are going into being special education teachers. There are students who are going into maybe working for organizations like Special Olympics and so on and so forth. So not only do they want their volunteerism to continue after they finish high school, but they've chosen the possibility of helping others to be a career path. That's pretty mind-boggling, and they will tell you it's because of their experience with Champions Together and everything that it's provided to them personally and the people that they've been able to touch.
That's great. All right. So if any adult or student, they want to learn more about Champions Together, what should they do?
Probably the easiest way would be to contact the Indiana High School Athletic Association and simply state that you want to talk to someone about Champions Together or being involved in unified sports, and whomever happens to be answering the phones that day will direct their call to me. My email is pretty easy. It's bavery@ihsa.org. So reach out in that manner. If you are a student or a fan of athletics in your community, possibly reach out to your athletic director. Athletic directors, I think, know who I am for the most part, and they know very easily how to contact me as well. And one of my goals is to provide athletic directors with an easy way to incorporate this program within their building without creating a bunch more work for them, because high school athletic directors are very busy. They've got a lot on their plate. And while I think it would be one of the most satisfying things that they will ever do in their professional career, I don't want to add a bunch more work. Champions Together is designed to be a student-led program. And once you have a group of students who want to make this a priority in your school, there's no stopping them. I'm telling you, there's no stopping them. But if I've learned one thing in all my years in education, ideas that students have go a lot further than ideas that adults have in terms of selling them to the student body and community. When you get the students and the student body behind something, things are limitless.
Well, Brian, as you know, during the assemblies, I always tell the students that my favorite part of Champions Together has been all the new friends that I made in the last 11 years. And I'm very pleased to count among those friends you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your leadership. And as always, enjoyed our conversation here today. Any final thoughts you want to share with these folks as we wrap up this video?
My final message would be to schools and communities: don't ever sell yourself short. Don't ever think you can't do this. Don't ever think that you don't have the students or resources available to do something. While achieving the banner is a wonderful thing, fielding unified sports teams is a wonderful thing, there are many, many positives that can occur in your building and in your community without doing any of those activities, even if it's just a 1 or 2 day activity. If you're raising awareness about inclusion, if you're making your school a more welcoming place, it's a wonderful thing. So give your students, give your community the possibility of maybe growing into something bigger and better, but at least providing students with an opportunity to be involved in such a great cause at a young age.